Hey there everyone, just decided to do a little end of the year Q&A. I guess there's not really much of an intro needed for that. Oh, and I've recently gotten back into TF2, which is a topic I'll touch on later. So that'll be the background footage for today, hope you don't mind. Oh, and I'm gonna avoid answering questions I've already answered in past videos, like the origin of my username and whatnot. So I'll link all of my past Q&A videos in the description for those curious enough. Alright, let's just start with a prompt subject I've been getting a lot. Mockrock asks me where this channel is gonna go in the next year or two. I've gotten a lot of people asking similar things, so I think it's something worth touching on in good detail. I've hinted at it in a couple of videos, and anyone looking at my recent uploads can see that I have, indeed, been experimenting more than I used to. To not cut corners, I don't see myself sticking with Smash in the future. I don't know when that future will come where I slow down the Smash side of things, but once I get given the opportunities, it will be an active plan of mine to experiment on non-Smash videos in hopes of something new sticking. You've already seen a few examples of this with my Metroid Dread review video, as well as my Breath of the Wild 2 wishlist. Both videos I put a good amount of time and passion into. Of course, by channel standards they did not do well at all, but from a general perspective they each got a few 10,000 views or so, and seemed to get overall positive reception. That is the type of content I'd like to do moving forward. Video essays on various other games and topics that I'm interested in, primarily related to Zelda. The issue is that, while I'm still happy with the views they got, it's nowhere near high enough to sustain the channel or myself financially, if I were to just focus on them. So at the moment I've still gotta ease into things. So my specific plan is to keep these experimental videos tossed in here or there for the year 2022. But when Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, I'm gonna spend the first month or so covering that game hard. Trying out different content formats, perhaps even using the random facts format on it if I see the opportunity. And from there we have two possibilities. Either A, the Breath of the Wild 2 videos do really well and I'm able to shift the channel's focus to there, perhaps even spreading out to other games or just Zelda in general. But really I'd be much happier focusing on anything related to Zelda than Smash, given my current interest in each respective series. Or B, the videos do terrible even after tons of experimentation, capitalized at the perfect timing from the game's release window, and I'm essentially forced back into Smash if I want to rake in any views. If this happens, unfortunately I think the channel's future will be a lot less bright. I'll keep at it, of course. I'll keep making content to entertain folk and help sustain myself financially, but while trying to pursue my future careers in other areas. And if I'm essentially being into that Smash field with no real options outside of it, I can assume that my motivation for the channel will take a hit too. I don't fully know what would happen if option B is what occurs, as I'm kinda hoping option A is at least in the ballpark of what goes down at that time. I'd like to be able to have a lot of passion and motivation for this job, you know? And I don't see that being fully maintained if I have to stick to Smash. But at the same time, I need money to survive. It's not like I dislike Smash or Smash content by any means. It's just, you know, not where the passion is. Okay, so to summarize, I'm going to keep experimenting here and there throughout 2022. And once Breath of the Wild 2 releases, whenever that is, I'm going to focus on making content on that game, probably for a month or two. If that succeeds, this will likely turn into a channel focused around Zelda. And if that fails, I'll go back to focusing on Smash, but the future of the channel will be shorter than before probably. It's hard to predict what can happen on such a volatile market, but this is the general outline for me. Of course, who can say when Breath of the Wild 2 will be released? Certainly not anyone right now as of making this video. And frankly, I think it's likely to happen at the end of 2022 holiday season, if it doesn't get delayed. Also, I got a lot of comments asking what I'm gonna do on the channel now that the Smash DLC is done. Again, I've already gone over how I want to move on from Smash, but that's because my personal passion for the game is fading. It's not because I think the game is dead now. You'll have to remember, I first made a name for myself in the Smash 4 era, about a year before Ultimate released. In that era, the game was getting no DLC or updates or anything, and yet its content was thriving. And at the moment, I don't see how that could be different for Ultimate. Specifically regarding my content, I think a lot of people assume that with DLC and updates done, that there aren't going to be new facts for me to go over, right? But I really don't think this is the case. In my entire Random Facts series, only a small portion of the facts are specifically due to DLC and updates. And for most of the Fighter Pass 2, I could only get one solid video from each new DLC member. Basically, I don't think there's a huge shortage of facts, especially given the success of my little series where I go over the in-game tips. I've got other plans for formats similar to that. Of course, there would have to be an end eventually to how many facts and whatnot I can cover before I start repeating myself, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. If I were to focus solely on Smash like I have been so far, I could reasonably see myself making another 2 or even 3 years worth of content on it just fine. So I don't think there's an issue there. There's still a lot going on in Smash Ultimate, and a lot of potential things for me to go over. So up until I try out Breath of the Wild 2 stuff, the Smash content's gonna be just fine. Next, Luke NS asks what I intend to do when a new Smash game comes out. At one point I thought about making a video of my thoughts on Smash's future, what we could expect from a potential future title, and when that'd be, and all that. But I guess I decided not to talk about it since it felt like jumping the gun, talking about the game's future so soon after the Ultimate game had just ended. But I do think it's an interesting topic worth talking about. I don't see there not being another Smash game. I just don't. Regardless of who says what and what not, it's just too successful of a series for Nintendo to just scrap it for the rest of time. Perhaps they'll do a spin-off in a very similar fashion, but realistically I expect something to release in the Smash series again in the future. When that future is hard to say, but I don't expect it anytime soon. To be specific, I'd be pretty surprised if it happened within this 2020 decade. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I do expect to be waiting for a long time. Also a bit of a tangent, but I personally don't think that Smash Ultimate is really the ultimate game. I think there's a lot more that goes into Smash than raw roster size, personally at least. And there's a few areas that I do, again personally, feel are lacking in Ultimate. I think its single player is a bit more dull than past games, and I do greatly miss things like trophies and whatnot. And there's plenty of side games like Smash Run that I definitely miss too. And I think a big thing is that its online is frankly terrible and laughable, which is really not a good thing considering the only way you can play games with other people is online, given the current pandemic situation. But from a marketing perspective, this probably is the ultimate Smash game, and future titles are probably not going to have the same roster size. I expect about half the size, maybe 40 or 50 characters. Who they could keep and take away, I could make guesses, but I don't want to spend too much time on here. Or they could go the route of making Melee HD. Not really a unique Smash game, keeping Ultimate as the ultimate game, but still giving them, new Smash content to make bank from. If they did this, I could see it being released much earlier than a brand new game. But ultimately, I don't see a new Smash edition happening for a very long time. I reckon by the time a new Smash game appears, I'll either have already shifted my focus on the channel to another game, or just, games in general, or maybe just a completely different topic. Or I'll start focusing on my own personal career, that's separated from YouTube. But in the off chance that I am still doing YouTube stuff when the new Smash comes out, I'll definitely make at least some content on it, since I reckon by that point I would have taken a bit of a break from Smash. Perhaps a new game of any sort could spark some new motivation in me. Not to focus on the game, of course, but I'd try to make some content on it, I think. Though it's so far into the future that I just don't really care about talking about it. Alright, actually I'm just gonna get all these Smash related questions out of the way immediately, and then go into everything else. P. Jiggles asks what my thoughts are on useful Smash facts. Smash facts to the point. I'm going to answer this likely joke question with a decently serious answer. One thing I've learned throughout my time with Smash and watching Smash related videos, as well as seeing how people react to different types of facts, is that, as it turns out, whether or not a fact is useful is actually extremely subjective. I'd seen so many people comment about how facts in my Pointless Facts series were actually not that pointless, which is what prompted me to rename the series to the now Random Facts. With a game like Smash where there's so many different playstyles and ways to approach it, a fact about how an item works can be completely useless to certain players, but can actually be genuinely helpful towards others. I think that's really interesting, and it's why my content can work so well. I try to get a decent combination of facts that are just interesting for the sake of existing, facts that are more useful for the casual audience, and facts that are aimed more for the competitive players. I think this helps the channel be more interesting to a wider audience, which is really important for a content creator, and it's just what I like more, as someone who is in between that casual and competitive mindset. Next, Chie Satanoka724 asks what series I think is misrepresented in Smash. I know there's a lot of series that could easily fit this bill, but from my own personal thoughts, I really do think the Zelda series is terribly misrepresented in Smash. It has 6 characters, which is nothing to sneeze at, but when you take away the 2 cloned characters, as well as the character who's a shadow of his actual abilities due to time restraints and an unwillingness to change, thus being just Captain Falcon but worse, and the Zelda series only really has 3 good representations. Still not bad, but it's Zelda, one of the big boys. The 2 other Links sharing almost identical items and moves with the other Link is not a great representation for how the games work. where they usually have a wide variety and a different variety of weapons. Young Link, for example, uses the hookshot and the bow and arrow, despite not being able to in his game, because it's locked off for the younger version of Link. So either they could have pulled a better pull from his actual available items in the game, or they could have just had him represent Majora's Mask Link, where the bow and the hookshot would be available, which opens up even more items as well as masks that he could use. And Toon Link just has a lot more to offer than the standard trio of special weapons and the hookshot, like the Deku Leaf, and the grappling hook, or the skull hammer, etc. They also could have just made him use the previous items differently. Perhaps he can swap between elemental arrows, or maybe he uses the mirror shield instead, which reflects projectiles, anything like that. And Ganondorf, boy oh boy. Being a beefy Captain Falcon clone is really fun, I'm not gonna lie, but it sure does make him a terrible competitive character despite canonically having access to much more magic and movement options that are just way cooler than normal. Ugh, man. When they make a new Smash game, I kinda hope they just fully revamp a lot of the older characters, whose kits are just kinda lame. Just give them the same treatment modern day DLC gets, you know? I think that'd be a really good idea for a new Smash title. Just going with the older characters but completely revamping them, that'd be pretty cool. Next, Blue Mario Gaming asks which patch glitch I'd like to see return. I can't really think of all the glitches right now, but if I had to choose off the top of my head, it's between 3, all of which I've covered. There's that Isabelle fishing rod glitch, which totally glitched out any item in the game, spawning infinite assist trophies and whatnot, which was very cool. The King K. Rool glitch, where he just gets totally broken in a very unique and interesting way. And the T-pose glitch, which is just, hysterical. Any of these returning will be very funny to me. Related, Didi asks what my favorite glitch or fact is that I've gone over on the channel. This is another hard one because I can't really think of everything I've gone over, I'm good at determining whether or not I've seen a fact before, but not good at pulling them from my memory. So for now, I'll just say the silhouette glitch. This glitch proved to be insanely interesting with a lot of really weird things happening. The only thing it's missing is a way to straight up crash the game, but I'm sure there's some way to do it. It's wacky and not too hard to pull off, and has tons of moving parts. It's just really good, I love it. Alright, that's all the Smash stuff, so let's move on to other video game stuff. Axel240 asks what I think the best Zelda game is. I've recently come to the conclusion that I am incapable of having a single favorite for most things, as I've come to appreciate how things can scratch different itches and appeal to different aspects of myself. For this reason, I will instead provide you an unordered top 6 list of my favorite Zelda games. Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword, and A Link to the Past, with Minish Cap thrown up there. After a lot of retrospect, it is hard for me to pair Minish Cap with the other 5, but I do really love the game, as you can probably imagine, and I think it deserves so much more love than it gets, so I've just gotta mention it, Here's a tier list I made a while back on this, so you can read it if you want. Next, Notorious Notepad asks what my absolute favorite Zelda song is. Once again, boiling it down to one answer is something I physically cannot do. Even if you had a gun held against my head, I would just look you in the eyes and tell you to pull the trigger. I don't even think I can boil it down to 10 songs, so I'm just gonna make a small list. Mulgaro's battle theme, the intro and credits to the Wind Waker, Stone Tower Temple, that's a good one. Song of Time and Song of Storms are classics. Oh, and the main Zelda theme, that's perfect. Palace of the Winds and Cloud Tops, retroactively including Minish Cap's credits theme. Oh yeah, and also A Link to the Past credits theme, that's really good. The Final Hours from Majora's Mask is really good. I love Linebeck's theme. Spirit Track's Realm Overworld song, the Dark World from A Link to the Past, A Dragon Roost Island, and by extent Rito Village. Okay, at this point the list is never going to end, so you get it. Next, Stevie TDP asks if I played every Zelda game and who my favorite partner character is. I don't know if people count Triforce Heroes as a spin-off or not, but outside of those types of games, I only haven't completed the first 2 games really. Just not for me, I've never been motivated enough to complete them. And my favorite partner character is a hard tie between Midna from Twilight Princess and Zelda from Spirit Tracks. It's hard for me to pick between the two, but I feel like Zelda just barely edges Midna out for me. If only for the fact that this is the best representation of the character in the entire series probably. Which gives the title, Zelda, much more impact. And I think she's just a delight with lots of genuinely interesting gameplay used too. Really cool. Alright, let's just move on to TF2 for a bit. Waka Waka Wookie 20 asks what my plans are for the TF2 channel. This is going to be related to my alternate channel I made a while back focusing around TF2, so if you don't really care about that, you can skip to different chapters ahead. If you have checked the channel anytime soon, you'll likely have noticed that it's been almost half a year since the last upload. I feel bad for that, but at the same time, it kinda just is what it is. I'm very proud of the effort and result of the few videos on the channel, and I think managing to get 5,000 subs there is really cool, but I'm in a very weird position with the game and the community right now. Currently, I don't have high hopes for the game's future. Bots are still a problem, as are many other things that affect the game's core, like team balancing issues, jank and unfun mechanics and weapon balancing, and the community? Now, I may be a bit more harsh on the TF2 community than is deserved, but it's hard for me to really honestly say that. In my few years of religiously consuming TF2 content and playing the game, I've run into much more nonsense that I can say I'm happy to welcome into my life. A lot of just extremely unpleasant people in the community, and a lot of racism, transphobia, and all of that scattered throughout. And like, I know that you could say that that's the case for a good chunk of large multiplayer shooter games, but as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't really matter. And trust me, I know that there's more than plenty of absolutely lovely people and amazing content creators for the game, but it's put me in a position where, in interacting with the game extensively, I have to interact with an extremely unsavory part of the community that I'd rather not have to interact with at all. That was sort of my mindset for my few month break I took from the game. But ultimately, I do really enjoy playing the game, and it's basically the only game I play nowadays. I love so many parts of it, and I still have many pleasant interactions with pleasant people. So I'm just sort of in a purgatory of loving this game and the things it does for me, and hating this game and some of the interactions and types of people that inevitably spawn from it. So when you pair all that with my increasing busyness with other aspects of life, and it just stands to reason that my motivation for going out of my way to make content for the game is low. But again, I'm very proud of the videos I did manage to get out, and had a fun time making them. So I won't guarantee that the channel is dead. It's possible I'll get a rush of motivation to put together some of my clips, which I have no shortage of. But for the time being, at least anticipate that the channel's activity is going to be extremely low. I'd gone into it hoping to make a name for myself in the TF2 community and have fun making tons of videos, but for all the reasons described, that source of motivation is basically gone. And I'm just more motivated to approach TF2 as a casual side activity rather than anything else. Also, I forgot to mention this in the original script, but an especially big reason for my decreased motivation of the game was that it was something I most enjoyed playing with my friends. But not only are my friends playing less, for similar reasons as I mentioned before, but even when we do get a decent party, getting a good casual match is nearly impossible. Not entirely impossible, but very difficult. With parties of 3 or more people or so, getting into a lobby that isn't either full of bots on the other team, or where the other team isn't a stacked party of Highlander professionals, is more difficult than it should be, which leads to a lot of re-queuing and frustration, rather than anything enjoyable. In retrospect, while everything I said before is true for me, I think those things were sort of just a straw that broke the camel's back sort of situation. Whereas the difficulty of playing with friends is probably what most makes it hard for me to see TF2 as anything other than a super casual pastime nowadays. So yeah, there's a lot of thoughts there, but I guess it is something worth going into due to how many people I see ask me about the TF2 channel. Next, Crimson asks what my favorite TF2 weapon and cosmetic is. My favorite cosmetics are the Towering Pillar of Hats, preferably with the Stormy Storm Unusual effect, and the Macho Man. I've got a strange version of it with over 75,000 points scored and over 1.4 billion damage dealt. It's kinda nuts. I'm a bit of a cosmetic loyalist, so I try to make sure every single one of my loadouts has at least these 2 equipped, outside of Pyro who could not have the Macho Man. And my favorite weapon is a combination of any rocket launcher and the Market Gardener. I specifically either like this weapon loadout, you know, the Roamer, or the Trolldier loadout. Either way, I think the rocket launcher is the coolest general weapon since it's super effective with a really high skill ceiling, and it gives you access to rocket jumping, which is potentially the funnest movement option in gaming history. And the Market Gardener perfectly pairs with this amazing mechanic in a way that genuinely rewards skill with, again, a high skill ceiling and an even higher dopamine dose. Honestly, I think Soldier single-handedly keeps bringing me back to the game. I mean, he's far from the only class I play, but he's my favorite by a long shot. Next up, Therese gives me a smorgasbord of questions. How exciting. Have I played The Binding of Isaac? No. It looks alright, but I'm not very interested. What's my favorite song from Mother 3? Perhaps Master Porky's theme, perhaps It's Over, perhaps 16 Melodies. As usual, it's really hard to say. Am I religious? No. How did I learn how to edit? I taught myself at first, looking up things as I went along, but then I got Premiere Pro, so I just watched a course on Skillshare to get the hang of it. And after that, again, I just look things up when I need to learn them. What's my favorite TF2 map? Badwater Basin or Hightower, depending on my mood. Kirby? No. Next, Zach Madden asks what my sponsor for today's video is. Well, golly, Zach, I'm really glad you asked because today's sponsor is Rate. Actually, never mind. Sorry, no sponsor for today. I'll link to my Patreon in the description. You get access to an exclusive Discord server. Next, Sanguis asks how the Japanese studying's going. It's going really well, I'd say. I really think I've made good progress so far. It's kind of hard to gauge this sort of thing, but I'm getting to the point where if I have Japanese subtitles on for an anime, there's a good chance I'll be able to watch it and have a general understanding of what's going on. I've still got a really long ways to go, like a really long ways to go, but it's been getting easier and easier to immerse in the language, which is really important. I'm at a point where it's really just about learning vocabulary and phrases, and just strengthening my understanding of them through experience, which is kind of fun in its own right. It's kind of like a collectathon where I gotta collect vocab. I haven't taken an official test, but after taking practice tests, I'd say I'm getting close to the JLPT N3 level. Maybe I'm a bit lower, but I think I'm in that ballpark. And I guess I could have said this before, but yeah, for those of you not in the know-how yet, I am indeed learning Japanese. That's why some screenshots you see on my channel have a Japanese UI. I've been learning for about 9 months now. It's very intensive. Oh, but I haven't really been training my speaking or sentence forming yet. I've mostly just trying to get better at comprehending the language. I'll focus on what we call output much later, I think, since that's not really a huge concern for me right now. So no, my speaking is not very good. Next, Akira asks what tips I'd give to someone who's trying to learn Japanese. I'm not going to spend too much time on this since I know the language learning field isn't very depictive of my audience, but to give some basic advice for anyone starting to learn Japanese, at the beginner levels, what you need to really focus on is, well, of course, the beginner level content. This comes in a few forms. You should learn the writing system, that being both hiragana and katakana, and get a grasp for the general meanings of the more common kanji, as well as the basics of how kanji are formed with their radicals and whatnot. The kana can easily be remembered by just some repetition and practice. I think I got most of them down after like a week or so. And there's plenty of sites for that. And there's a few ways to learn kanji. You can look into the methods yourself, there's quite a few ways. I always encourage doing research on how to learn X or Y on YouTube or Google or whatever, just to get good and thorough videos on the topics. Next, you should learn the basic grammar and vocabulary. For grammar, it really is just about learning each little topic one at a time. Learning things like sentence structure, certain conjugations, particles, all that stuff. Plenty of ways to do that, be it books or YouTube videos or classes or what have you. And for vocab, you should start by learning the 1000 most common words in a language. I recommend learning vocab by making use of the flashcard app called Anki. It's a spaced repetition review system, meaning words take longer to appear again the more times you've given them that okay. This echoes the more effective form of memorization, where you see something a lot at first, but then start seeing it less and less. There's bound to be plenty of pre-made vocab decks that contain the more common vocabulary for the language, and this probably applies to any language. But to direct you to something more broad, I'm currently making use of the refold method, started by Matt from Matt vs. Japan, and a few other folk, which lays out a really good roadmap for how to learn any language, and with Discord servers available for a specific language. I'd recommend reading up on this and taking part of the refold community to get started. It's super important to get into a habit for this type of thing, and having good yet loose guidelines like these can make it a lot easier for you to do that, having confidence in the methodology and whatnot. Next, Cicho Green asks how my fitness life is going, and if I have tips. I think I talked about this in my Pixelmon video, and I don't know if I did anywhere else. But basically, for most of this year, I've been going hard on that weight loss grind. And from the start of the year to now, I've lost about 75 pounds total, going from 295 down to 220, and on pace to go even lower. So yeah, the pacing has had its ups and downs, but I'm still very consistently going down. Granted, I did take a bit of a break this holiday season, but not a big one. I'm very proud of this weight loss, but I have a decent amount left until I'm satisfied. As for tips, this is an interesting thing for me to talk about. I have a lot of opinions on this subject, a decent amount based off of experience, and originally I planned to talk a lot more about it specifically, but the thing is, I think we all already know what it is that's necessary to lose weight. That is, eating better and staying active, and doing these two things consistently. Now, I realize that there's a lot more to nutrition science than just the calories in, calories out mindset, but for the sole topic of weight loss, it really does boil down to that in my experience. Doing other things like avoiding fast food and sugary foods is undoubtedly really healthy too, which I do recommend as I've also been doing that. But generally, if you want to lose weight, you probably already have a pretty good idea of what to do. The issue is doing it. I also can't help but mention that I do come from a place of privilege here. I work freelance, meaning I can change my life schedule at will. And my job doesn't take a ton of hours away, so I have plenty of time to work with. And my mental health and other health areas are stable enough to where making the changes to a completely different diet are feasible. That is to say, getting on a diet and staying on it for extended periods of time is how you lose weight. And in order to make any sizable change to your life and make that a habit, will take devotion and effort. A big issue for me in the past was the insistence of cutting corners, looking for fad diets that would make the weight go away without any real changes to what I eat. And let me tell you, they never really worked. Maybe for some people they will, but generally, cutting corners is only going to result in your progress being either really slow or non-existent, which can lead to you feeling hopeless and thus going back to where you were before. The worst diet is one you don't stick with after all, so think inwards about what you think it will take for you to stick to something like that. And this affects all areas of life too. Think about your schedule, what sorts of planning you can do to make it easier to get into that habit. I did this a few ways. For one, I work out in the morning before I eat anything. This has two purposes. One, since I'm doing it before eating, it makes sure that I'm burning more of my body fat than anything else. At least that's what I gather. And two, it makes it hard to put off. If working out is a prerequisite to eating my first meal, it's hard to procrastinate compared to if I work out before bed, you know? Also, I make sure I always have something entertaining to watch while working out. Again, I guess this comes from a place of privilege, but if you could manage to watch some TV show while working out, I highly recommend it. I'm currently in the middle of watching One Piece, for example. A super long show that would normally be a daunting task, but is now a consistent form of motivation for me to exercise. And I do think having a hobby really helps. Ever since I started actively learning Japanese, a lot of my free time has been going towards studying and stuff related to that. Basically, the less time you spend doing absolutely nothing, the less snacking you do, and the less snacking obviously makes it easier to eat less in general. Of course, this requires you to actually find a hobby that interests you, which I can say from experience is really difficult, but it's something to consider. Outside of that, it's just about experimentation, but you need to be strict and realistic with yourself. That's one of the biggest things I've learned. Don't cut corners, don't tell yourself white lies. You've got to be harsh and real with yourself. After that, it's just about weighing priorities and making changes, shifting your diet to be better and better. I could go on and on about this stuff, but I think that's generally the advice I'd want to give to anyone looking to lose weight. It is the advice that really made me go from losing 5 pounds and then giving up, to losing 75 pounds in a year, and going onwards. Next, Yampai asks what my goals are for 2022. Last year, I really didn't have any goals around the new year. As always, I thought to myself how nice it'd be to lose weight, but at that point in my life, I didn't really have an aim or any aspirations. I just wanted to keep living, really. But this year is different. I have some very concrete goals now. For one, I just want to get even better at Japanese, of course. On my Migaku app, I currently have about 4,200 known words or so. It's not like a fully accurate counter, but I do think it's a good baseline to go with. I'd like to get that number somewhere close to 10,000 by the end of the year. Generally though, I just want to keep at it, keep getting better at the language with more experience and all that. Next, I want to lose more weight. At first, my end goal was around 185 pounds, as that would put my BMI in the healthy range for probably one of the first times in my entire life. At this point, I feel like I could go even lower considering everything I do is now just a habit of mine. But I also eventually want to focus on building muscle, so we'll play that by ear. But yeah, being able to hit 185 pounds and to say that I've lost over 100 pounds in my life is certainly a big goal. And where I am now, I've only got about 35 pounds left. Just gotta keep at it. Also, I've recently ordered an ocarina, like a good one and not a terrible quality replica ocarina that sounds bad and barely functions. I've recently had the craving for an instrument that I could actually, take with me to places. Note, you cannot really take a piano with you. And the ocarina has always sounded absolutely gorgeous to me. So I think learning how to play it and getting really good with it is another goal of mine. It depends on how hard it is to practice in my apartment, you know, because they're not very quiet. And same as last year, I just want to keep staying financially stable and just generally healthy and happy. Everyone feel free to tell me your New Year's resolutions too, if you have any. I'd love to hear about it. Next, Juan Carlos Rihani Millet asks what program I use to make music and how I learned. By the way, I'm very sorry if I mispronounced that name. I use FL Studio 12 as my DAW. I've always used it and I don't really see myself using anything different, ever. I learned most music by teaching myself. Taught myself how to use FL Studio. I taught myself music theory by tinkering around on the piano, and by reverse engineering video game songs. and watching videos on certain topics, and just generally kept going freeform like that. I think I could stand to get some more formal training on how to use FL Studio in other certain areas of composition, but I still think where I'm at now is pretty decent, all things considered. Now I have to mention the fact that it's been a hot minute since my last song upload. I'll be real, Japanese and health stuff has just taken up so much of my time nowadays that composing has sort of been pushed down the priority list. I don't intend to abandon music by any means, but it's just not a huge priority right now. I've got plans for songs that I'd like to work on eventually, and maybe when I get my ocarina I'll get more of a hankering for music. Next, Medjed asks what Subway sandwich I usually get. Okay, while I don't usually get subs anymore, since I've been avoiding eating out outside of special occasions, I still really love subs. They're among my favorite food types in general. I like to experiment with my subs, but my go-to is either ham or turkey, with any kind of cheese, preferably Swiss, plenty of lettuce and onion, with light mayonnaise, and the oils and shakers. This is like my baseline sub. Sometimes I add hot sauce or pickles or whatever if I'm feeling spicy. That was back when I ate subs way more back in college. Nowadays I probably would like more variation, like with a chicken tender sub or something, but that's still definitely the classic choice for me. Next, Cody Vista asks what made me start YouTube, or who inspired me. It's hard to pinpoint anything specific. YouTube has been my favorite form of video entertainment for as long as I can remember. Classic YouTubers like Markiplier, Choco Conroy, Tobuscus, JonTron, Manly Badass Hero, and tons of others that made up a lot of my childhood could certainly be seen as inspirations. But I don't think it's fair to give anyone or any group of YouTubers that spotlight. It's just YouTube in general. I've always loved the platform and I've always gotten tons of entertainment and knowledge from it. So I just think it was inevitable that I'd want to make videos on it too. Especially given how accessible it is. It wasn't some vaguely professional and impossible to reach form of media, like TV shows or movies. It was a website where you could upload your own content just as easily as you could watch it. So yeah, it was just always kind of there, Jeja jeja. Oh, or is it heha heha? Oh, they ask what my tips are for growing a channel. I think I've covered this type of question before, but I think this specifically is worth repeating. Some of the specifics of what you could do depend on what your goals are for the platform. If you simply want to get big, you can focus solely on trending topics and formats with a very high upload rate. If you just want it to be a hobby or passion project, just keep making high quality content that you like. But no matter what, there's a few things you should do. 1. Make good thumbnails and titles. Something eye-catching and really easy to digest, but something intriguing to click on. Basically, just think of the types of thumbnails and titles that you like clicking on, or that intrigue you. When you're starting out, you're definitely swimming upstream with how saturated the platform is, so you need something to help stand out. Anyone complaining about clickbait just doesn't really know what they're talking about. Of course, there are limits to clickbait, but you know how people are. Anything with a red arrow can set off a fuse in their brains. Just ignore that. If you want to grow, you gotta stand out. 2. You don't have to be unique, but you should try to carve out your own niche. That's why becoming a Let's Play or YouTuber is probably infinitely harder than a video essayist of certain topics, There's thousands and thousands of people making LPs, but if you make an intriguing video essay on an interesting topic, or have a unique and interesting series on a certain game, that makes you stand out more. Very important. 3. Latch onto success with unreasonable grip. This can unfortunately lead to issues that are similar to where I'm at right now, but like it or not, whether or not something really pops off is ultimately down to luck. There's plenty of ways to manage that luck and increase your odds, but luck is luck. So if something pops off, stick with that. Keep doing it, even if just a little bit. Milk it to heaven and back if you can. You can diversify later if need be, but getting a more solid grip by gaining more views and subscribers should take priority, as you never know when another hit like that could happen. This might not sound appetizing to some folk, and I don't blame you, but it's really important in my opinion if you're hoping to get big in any way. Take your opportunities. You can't get too picky on a platform with this much competition. Unless you don't really care, then just go nuts, There's plenty of other things, but obviously I'll just leave it there. Next, Narf2483 asks what kind of shows I watch. Also, I have not seen Arcane, no. I really only exclusively watch anime nowadays. I mean, I watch YouTube a bunch, too, though I don't know if you'd actually count that as shows? I mean, I kinda do, but whatever. Outside of that, it really is exclusively anime. I rarely watch any other TV or movies. I mean, not only do I love anime anyways, but it serves a dual purpose. It helps me learn Japanese, I've never been really big on movies, but I did used to watch a lot more TV back when I lived with my parents and had cable. But for me now in my apartment, I don't even own cable since I know I'd rarely use it compared to just streaming apps, so I didn't really need to pay that extra monthly fee. And I think I'm perfectly fine. If anything, it helps me not procrastinate. I do sort of miss the food channel, but oh well, there's loads of interesting food channels on YouTube. Next, Shane Phillips asks what my favorite pasta is. My go-to is usually penne. I just really like the shape, for most things. But I also really like spaghetti, it's just a classic that's hard to go wrong with. It really depends on what you decide to put in your pasta, but I feel like those two shapes cover a lot of ground, so I really like them. Finally for the video, Ariel Rogers asks how I've been doing mentally and how I deal with burnout. I've been doing amazingly mentally lately. That's a lot of adverbs. But yeah, I've been doing really good. Being healthier alone has had a huge impact on self-confidence and happiness. But this year is the year I discovered my new passion and future prospect in the form of learning Japanese, and it's just been a rather successful year overall. So tons of productivity and feeling great. There's a few ways to deal with burnout, but for me the simple answer is to just stop doing things. I can usually tell when I'm starting to get burned out, and when that happens I just chill out for the day. Watch videos, play games, listen to music. I still study a bit of Japanese usually, and I still try to work out, but that's because those things are such a deeply rooted part of my daily habits that it's kind of weird for me not to do them. Though it's still work, so I feel like I've been going towards burnout regarding the content creation this half of the month, even after my break. So I'm thinking about taking the start of next year a little easier. I might try to get some sponsorships ready to help me financially and just decrease the uploading a bit, but we'll play it by ear and see how things go. But yeah, I just noticed the signs of me getting really tired and just spent a few days taking a break. I know that's easier said than done given people's circumstances, but that's really what you gotta do. Just drop the work and stressors and do things that are relaxing and enjoyable. I like ASMR too, which helps me relax a lot more. And could even be used to train my Japanese even further if you get me. I know that's not for everyone though, but I certainly enjoy it. And I think I'll leave it there. Pretty long video if I do say so myself. If you stuck around this far, I really appreciate it. It's really nice to know that there's any number of people interested in me enough to watch a whole video like this. I enjoy these types of videos and it makes me glad to know other people do too. And of course, thank you for an amazing 2021. The channel's been going steady with a few ups and downs, but we're ending the year in another uptrend, which is lovely. The future is uncertain, but I'm definitely looking forward to experimenting more and keeping up the good work. And of course, I have to thank my gorgeous patrons Scully, Hobo King Nichols, Rain, Sevon700, and everyone else for their support. Stay casual, and I'll see y'all later.